Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to the concession stand here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and we are about to review the third episode of the second season to Marvel Studios' Loki, which is currently on Disney Plus. The title of episode 3, 1893. And this is the midway point of the season, being as though this season of Loki is only 6 episodes, which is criminal to me because I'm enjoying it so much. But we've reached the midway point, and in this particular episode, we have all of our major players involved in this episode in one way or another. This is our first meeting of Victor Timely, portrayed by Jonathan Majors, who is a variant of Kang the Conqueror, or He Who Remains, who we've met thus far in the MCU, all played by Jonathan Majors. Loki, Sylvie, Morbius, and we have returning for the first time this season from last season, uh, Renslayer, who is portrayed by Gugu Mbatha Raw, and Miss Minutes, voiced by the great Tara Strong. I enjoyed this episode, but I do have flaws with it, but ultimately I enjoyed it. The little things that I didn't enjoy or I didn't like, or I'm kind of scratching my head with, is little nitpick things that I have throughout the episode. But nonetheless, I did enjoy this episode. I think it's one of the better episodes of the season thus far. And so let's dive into what took place in episode 3, entitled 1893. This episode takes us back to that year in Chicago during the World's Fair. We meet Victor Timely, a variant of Kane, but unlike the Kane we met in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, or even He Who Remains from season 1 of Loki. Victor is rather timid. He's not nearly the evil mastermind that we thought we were going to get. Um Actually, in this version of Victor Timely, he's a con man. You know, he is swindling people for their money at the World's Fair, where we saw early, I guess you could say, prototype to the temporal loom that is in the TVA. And so he swindles these people out of their money, having people bid for it, even though the thing doesn't work. So this is how Loki, Morbius, and Renslayer meet him for the first time, and wanting to take him back to the TVA in order to get the temporal uh, scanner, for his I guess aura. I think they said the aura of He Who Remains, and he would be the only one that could do it in order to fix the temporal loom and save the universe, essentially, before all these time branches explode, overload the loom. And before I go any further, I just want to say, going into this episode and looking at how the set design and the cinematography of this episode played out, in the first 5 to 10 minutes of it, I was in awe, and it continued on throughout the episode. I gotta say it now because I can't contain it. It was so beautiful to watch. I mean, to see the World's Fair in 1893, it's almost like they captured it or shot on location with it, and we know better, but it just looked so beautiful. uh Hats off to the director of this episode. I didn't catch the name, but they did an amazing job. It looked just phenomenal visually. And so jumping back into this episode, we see that Renslayer has been, well, we pick up with Renslayer right after season 1, where we left off with her when she left the TVA. And this is right where she returns. And she returns in, it wasn't 1886, I think, or 90 93. Yeah, I think it was 1886 or something to that effect. But anyway, under the direction of Miss Minutes, who returns uh in season 2, instructs Renslayer to hand over the TVA handbook, it, to this individual. What, she didn't tell him who, she just told her to put it through this window. And we see that this young black man, it or young black boy, little boy, in the room as the package is dropped off, and he opens up the package, and it's the TVA handbook that we have seen in the last 2 episodes that we know was written by OB. And so it was a nice little plant there for the past 2 episodes. And I knew that book played a major part. I just didn't know what, because they kept going back to that book from episode 1, 2, and now 3. We get an idea. This is the MacGuffin here. This is the sports almanac from um Back to the Future 2. You know, so this was going to play a major part here. And we later find out, of course, that that young black boy grows up to be Victor Timely. And so now you have to ask yourself the question: is the TVA handbook being placed in the hands of this young boy the seed to Cain? Is this the origin of Cain? Is this the reason he became who he was? Uh, So many questions there, you know. Now, granted, it isn't a real important question, but it's just a fun one to think about. Like, wow, is something that simple is the reason we have this big threat now? And it, unbeknownst to our heroes of this story, it is like you missed it, so it's over now. But regardless, it's just crazy that something that simple can cause such a, I would say global, but actually universal problem. And we have the arrival of Loki and Morbius in 1893 to find Miss Minix, because that's who they were initially searching for, only to stumble onto Renslayer and Victor Time. And so now the stakes have gotten a little higher, you know. And we saw the post credit scene in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. As we can see, that was a scene from this episode. So it wasn't shot for that movie. They just took a scene from this episode and put it in the end credits of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. And so we always knew this was coming. And so it was kind of funny, you know. But I love Tom Hiddleston in that scene when he saw Victor Timely, in the fear that ran through his face, through his body. He displayed it beautifully. And I was like, man, I got worried. I got scared. Like, is Victor Timely going to do something now here in this particular episode of the show? But it was brought back down to earth with Owen Wilson. He was like, wait, that's the guy you're afraid of? It's like, really? That dude? He just sucked all of the fear and tension out of that scene. But it was rightfully placed. We go through a little rigmarole, a little back and forth, where they were trying to chase down Victor Timely. Renslayer has gotten him, her and Miss Minutes, should I say, and they managed to evade Victor Time. Not Victor Time. They managed to evade Loki and Morbius and the people that was swindled by Victor Timely, and they end up on a boat, and we see a nice scene there between Jonathan Majors and Gugu Mbatha Raw, and this was just acting one on one here. I must say, Jonathan Majors, once again, it shows that he is so versatile. He was so funny in this episode throughout. this episode, and the way he played this character is genius because he's playing all these characters different. He played He Who Remains, Kang, and now Victor Timely differently. These are three different people, yet they're the same, if that makes any sense. But the way he played them is genius, and I love his adaptation of Victor Timely with the stammer and the timidness and the awkwardness, and you could tell he's a genius, but he lacks a little common sense, maybe. I don't know, but it's I'll say that he's book smart, but not street smart. I'll say that much. But it was such a good performance. I don't know what's going to happen with him, uh, legally, personally, with the situation he was going through. Uh, but whatever happens, I can tell you this: that's not going to take away from the fact that he is an amazing actor. An amazing. The whole time watching this episode, I was just smitten by his performance. But we get an appearance from Sylvie. She pops up uh and tries to kill Victor Timely, and Loki is trying to stop her, and they having a back and forth and whatnot, and her logic is sound, and that's what makes this so compelling because they're both right. Loki and Sylvie, they're both right, but both can't have it their way. Somebody is going to be unhappy at the end of the day, and so and it's going to ultimately affect everyone in the universe. But they're both right. But anyways, the scene I really wanted to touch in on, leading up to another scene that I want to touch in on, and that is uh Victor Timely and Renslayer's little connection on the boat. And we see that there is a connection there. They're kind of semi flirting with one another, and they touch hands and everything. But all the while, we have Miss Minutes in the background who is looking upon this, and you sense the jealousy, even in her voice. Tara Strong voicing this character is voicing. I mean, if you don't have a lot of respect for voice actors, you think they just stand in a booth and recite lines and don't emote. Watch this episode. You'll look at voice acting differently. I never felt that way, but I know a lot of people do feel that way. I, Tara Strong, I mean, killing it in this role, voicing Miss Minutes, and the jealousy from this AI projection. It was like, man, it was kind of spooky in a way and creepy, you know, to the point to where she got Renslayer kind of jettisoned away from Victor Timely to where she can be alone with him, and that led to the other scene where she is, I guess you could say, confessing her feelings to her, to Victor Timely, and expressing how she wish she had a body that she can show him that she loves him, and they could do more together, wink wink. And I thought that was a awesome scene, and for the way Jonathan Majors was playing off of it, and kind of worried and creeped out by it, and ultimately trapping her back in the little temp pad was like genius. It was really, really played out well. It was well directed and everything. So I really love that part of it. Uh this episode ends with, I would say, some uh, cliffhangers in a way, but setting up uh these next 3 episodes to be very interesting. Loki and Morbius managed to get Victor Timely to come back to the TVA after they stop Sylvie from killing him, and she has a moment of clarity and lets him live. And I thought that was a really good scene, very played out well by the actress who played Sylvie. I thought she did an excellent job here. I mean, really good. I didn't like when she popped up earlier. I'm gonna get to that when I get to the points I don't like about this episode, but I loved her in this scene. So Loki and Mobius takes him away. They go back to the TVA. Sylvie kicks Renslayer through the time door, and she ends up at the Citadel at the end of time, where we see the rotten corpse of He Who Remains still in the chair, slumped over, decaying. And her and Miss Minutes, she released Miss Minutes from the time from the box. And she tells Renslayer that, I know some secrets about him, and I know some secrets about you, but you're not gonna like it. It's gonna make you really angry. And so they're plotting their revenge. And so going back in the episode ends. So going back to Victor Timely, uh getting him back to the TVA. This is where I'm like, I don't like this, because they going to, and I mean, not like it like this, not good for the story. I don't like it for the story, because I think he did this on purpose. This was part of the plan. He basically, it was a Trojan horse, if you will. He wanted to get back, or not get back, but come to the TVA, and this was part of the plan. And Miss Menace was saying that all throughout the episode, that this was part of He Who Remains plan, to give him the book, to uh for him to meet Renslayer, and so on and so forth. So all this is playing out the way He Who Remains intended. So him going back to the TVA, I believe, is part of the plan. We'll find out a little later on in these next 3 episodes, I would imagine. Um Sylvie having this, turn here, I think is a nice turn. And the Renslayer and Miss Minutes being at the end of time, as the Citadel is crumbling around them, the rotten corpse of He Who Remains is there. They're plotting their revenge. So what's going to come with that? This was a nice setup. This was a nice mid-season point for this series. The points that I don't like about this episode, like I said, they're nitpicks, but they kind of bothered me. It bothered me to the point I have to mention them. The first thing is when Renslayer first meets, well, don't not first meets, but run into Loki and Morbius, when they meet up with Victor Timely, and they're trying to go, take Victor Timely for their own reasons. Renslayer had zero reaction to it. Like, why are you here? Or not even a look on the face like, oh my God, they're here. None of that. It was like, okay, the conversation just kept going. It's like she knew they were there. She knew they would be there, but none of that was indicated earlier. So I don't know if it was a editing thing. Maybe they had a scene earlier that they cut out. I don't know. But when they first meet up, it was no surprise at all. And I was expecting her to see them like, oh my God, what are y'all doing? How do y'all get here? How do y'all know about this? Something. But it was none of that. It just bothered me. That bothered me. And speaking of showing up, I hinted to it earlier. Sylvie showing up, and showing up just out of the blue to kill Victor Timely. And it was like nobody questioned. She just popped up. How did she know to come there? Because she left the TVA before they found out where Sylvie was. At least if I could be mistaken. I know the last episode when she was in the TVA and they said they had a hit, but she had left. I don't think she found out where. You know, she was too distraught, so she just left. Actually, the last time we left her, she was back in her timeline at the McDonald's. So what happened? How did she just pop back up and knew exactly where they were? Unless she's tracking them some type of way that I missed. But it threw me off. It really did. It was a nice scene, You know, the back and forth with her and Loki and uh Victor Timely and the the Ferris wheel carriage or whatever. Nice scene. But it was kind of like thrown there. It was no setup to that. And oh my god, it was another scene that bothered me and it blew out my head. Maybe I didn't have another one, but I know those were my two bigger bugaboos of this episode. But none of that bothers me to the point where I was like, oh, this is a bad episode. This was still an excellent episode. It wasn't the best thus far. I still give that to the first episode. I thought that the first episode was perfect, but it's still up there. It's still good. I really enjoyed it, and I'm enjoying where this show is heading. This is I said it last week. I think I said it the week before, and I'm gonna say it again this week. This is the best thing from Marvel we have seen in 2 years. Honestly, it is really, really good and well acted, written, and directed. All three episodes thus far. Now, the wheels can come off the wagon with these next three. It's very possible, but I'm enjoying these three thus far. I can say that with my chest. I would like to know how you feel about this episode of Loki season 3. Let me know by email, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also look me up on all social media platforms. Just look up the KB Radio Network, as well as looking up the KB Radio Network channel on YouTube. Subscribe and like this video. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to the concession stand here on the KB Radio Network. Oh man, this is some good stuff. Loki, man. Loki. Oh, I remembered my other one. I remembered my other thing. I'm glad I caught it before we finished. The other thing was, which it wasn't bad, but it was noticeable. There wasn't much Loki in this episode. This was a Loki show, but it wasn't a lot of Loki. It was really Victor Timely and Renslayer and Miss Minutes. It was their episode. That's not a bad thing. You need to set up your characters, so it's not the end of the world. But it was just no Loki. uh, I could count on one hand how many scenes he was in. What, about 4 or 5, maybe? It was the rest of it was all Victor Timely, and that's fine. It's fine, but it just stuck out. It really stuck out. But regardless, I enjoyed it. As always, I'm not grading this episode. I'm not grading any of the episodes. We're gonna grade the season as a whole after the 6th and final episode of the season. Everybody, thank you for joining me for this review of Loki season 2 episode 3, entitled 1893, currently on Disney Plus. Can't wait to speak to you next week for episode 4. Until then, I want you all to know that I love you, continue to love everyone, and until we speak again, you all be blessed.